Star Trek Season 2 of the original series is something of a... It's a funny little story, especially behind the scenes, and a lot of moving and touching stories depending upon the actors and their reasons for continuing the series, and then the introduction of Chekhov, and then Sulu, and George Takei having to go film a movie and during filming of Season 2, so they replaced a lot of his scenes with Chekhov's character. That's why we didn't see much of Sulu in Season 2. And then there is a far bit more focus on Spock, and it was just a very interesting season. Is it as good as Season 1? No. There are quite a few episodes I really like, though. And there are quite a few episodes I want to talk about, even though they're not exactly as good. Let's take a look at this little paper here. We have a fancy little paper here with all of the episode names so that I can take a look at them and remember what they're all called. And we're going to go through quite a few of these and see if I can remember them just by the names alone, because I'm actually terrible at that. So let's see. If I can remember the name of the episode, that means the episode actually had some sort of resonance with me enough to remember the name. For example, Amok Time. Amok Time is that famous episode where Spock goes crazy and has to mate. You see, with Vulcans, they have eliminated the primitive need for emotions and all of that other low-brained mammalian shtick stuff going on, but the Vulcans couldn't completely eradicate what is called lust. He's corn dogging with an H instead of a C. Yeah, that's what it is. He's doing that, and he needs his mates. And so Vulcans technically mate when they're very young. They're arranged. Marriages are arranged. And then the wife or the husband could choose to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to do this. Let's do ritual combat. The bride-to-be could just say, hey, I don't want to do this guy. I invoke the right of ritual combat. I want him to fight this guy. And if he wins, fine. Or if that guy wins, then I'll be with that guy. And so that's basically what happens. Spock finds his fiancée does not want to be with him, and she invokes the ritual combat, which is an archaic, primitive ritual rite for Vulcans, and we don't exactly know why this ritual happens. It's pretty much like the only episode we get to visit Vulcans, so we still know absolutely nothing about this culture, but at least it's something. So Spock has to go do some ritual combat stuff, and we get the very infamous theme, that horn that goes do 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 do. It's basically like that, but with an actual instrument instead of my terrible humming. But basically, I heard that theme and this type of scenario years and years ago. Again, moving back to Futurama. Futurama and Star Trek is just like, they go hand in hand. I had no idea how big of an how huge of a Star Trek nerd Matt Groening was. The Groening was the guy who did Futurama. He created Futurama. And I had no idea how huge of a nerd he was for Star Trek. And there's an episode in Futurama where Zoidberg goes crazy, and he has to go do his shtick, go to his planet for mating season, but he can't find a mate because he's Zoidberg. And then we get that fancy little theme going on, and then ritualistic combat. I think Fry and Zoidberg's intended mate. His intended mate falls attracted to Fry, and so Zoidberg has to challenge Fry to ritualistic. It's very silly. I loved that episode. And, the first 4 seasons of Futurama are absolutely amazing. I've watched and rewatched them so many times. I should make a video about Futurama eventually, but I get to talk about it here. But that's where I was first introduced with this concept. So when I finally watched Amok Time for the first time, it felt like I wasn't watching it for the first time. It felt like I was already familiar with this type of story. But I wasn't familiar with this episode. I just knew all of the memes because Futurama already did it. It was a good episode. It wasn't as good as season 1, but it was a memorable one. Who Mourns for Adonais? I think that's the episode with Apollo. That's a pretty interesting one. That's one that's got... It's a very goofy episode. It's very goofy. And it's a very low-budget one, obviously. But it does try to answer a question. If we can make science fiction-y about various forms of ancient mythologies, what would be the easiest way to quantify these Olympians and Norse gods and all that stuff? How would it be the best way to quantify this? Well, they're aliens. If an alien came to your planet is very, very primitive, and this alien is highly advanced. He could shoot lightning out of his hands, and he can call thunderous sounds by the sound of his booming voice. He can make his body change shape at will. He can change the shape of matter and energy and cause all sorts of miracles to happen. Of course, the primitive humans are going to bow to these aliens, thinking that they're gods. Which is exactly what Star Trek tries to explain here. They go to this... The Enterprise finds this one planet, they beam down, and they find Apollo standing there. And it is Apollo. He is Apollo, he is very familiar with Earth ways, and he's basically saying, oh, we went to Earth a long time ago, and then we got bored and left. You can buy it. Yeah, Earth ain't the only planet in the galaxy. Of course these guys are gonna go like, alright, we got bored here, let's go find somewhere else to mosey. And so they left to go somewhere else. And Apollo's the only one who was still interested in Earth, even though he never left his planet. He just wanted the humans to come to him. I guess he's just lazy. I guess Dionysus rubbed off on him or something. He's too lazy to leave his own planet, or maybe he can't anymore. Either way, he wants people to come to his planet so that people can worship him. That's a pretty fun episode. It really was. I like that it tried to answer some sort of mythologies questions in a science fiction-y way. What else can I talk about? I, Mud is the sequel to Mud's Women. There are quite a few episodes in Season 2 that showcase continuity in very brief ways. There's an episode where Kirk and everybody ages really fast. It's called The Deadly Years here. Kirk and Spock and McCoy and Scotty start to age really rapidly due to being infected with some sort of radiation virus. And Kirk becomes demented. What's the word? Demented. Dementia! He starts to get dementia. And so he has to step down. And then McCoy and everybody else figure out the cure, and they cure Kirk. And then Kirk is back to younger again, just in time to stop an attack, I think, by some Klingons. And so Kirk mentions the Corbomite maneuver. And the Corbomite maneuver was mentioned in the episode of the same name, right here. Corbomite maneuver in Season 1. So we actually get some continuity to Season 1 in Season 2. Not a lot, but there are a couple more things. And I, Mud is another example. It is a sequel to Mud's Women, the Season 1 episode that I wasn't really a big fan of. But this one, I actually really enjoyed. Kirk and the crew find this planet full of extremely advanced android robots, and Mud has been trapped on this planet. These robots are programmed to serve humanity, and if they don't have a human to serve, they will basically hold one captive so that they can serve him. And that's what happened to Mud. He has been trapped on this planet. He could not leave because these androids were programmed to serve humans, and he has to stay there so they could serve him. It was a very funny, goofy episode. There are a lot of goofy episodes in Season 2 that I really appreciated. They weren't very big, cerebral science fiction stories, but I can appreciate a good, goofy episode. A thing that you can have fun and laugh. And I did have fun, and I did laugh. What else do we have to talk about? The Trouble with the Tribbles is another one. There's a lot of special features and bonus features scattered across these discs. that mentioned Trouble with the Tribbles and how they had so many of these things. They were just little balls of fur, and they were auctioning these things off through the Christie's auction house, and I believe they were being sold between $400 to $6,000 each, and they were thousands of these things made. These guys made some bank on these Star Trek props that probably didn't cost them a penny to make half of these things. All these uniforms they made extremely cheaply, and now they get to sell at like 1,000-time markup or something. It's crazy how much profit this series has made for this company when they still auction off all these shows. The Tribbles, it was a very funny episode. It was a very goofy episode. And there's something else that I do want to mention. Assignment Earth here introduces a character called Gary Seven. It was a shadow pilot for a spin-off show for Paramount CBS's attempt to make a Doctor Who, American Doctor Who spin-off, basically. And of course this episode failed. People really don't like this episode. I enjoyed it quite a bit. The female character in this, I forget her name, the blonde, she reminds me a lot of Alison Hannigan from the Buffy, the Vampire Slayer TV show. I can't remember her name. She was also in How I Met Your Mother. But she looks, sounds, her action, her mannerisms. I almost thought they were related for a moment there. I thought like she could be her mother or something. They were very, very similar in mannerism. It's very, very interesting. It was a very fun little episode. And it's goofy, it doesn't make sense, but then again, I kind of got used to it after a while, with Trouble with the Tribbles, Mud, and a couple of these other Doctor Who inspired episodes. Well, I say inspired, I don't actually know that, but that's my big theory. My big conspiracy theory is that Doctor Who really inspired a lot of the period piece episodes of this series, and inspired Assignment Earth as well. You see, Doctor Who started airing in the U.S. for about a year before this show started to premiere in the U.S. as well. Doctor Who started in the U.K. multiple years before this show came out, but then they started to localize it in America roughly a year, maybe two, before the original series started to air on cable TV. And it was popular, and the audiences, the fans overlapped. It's inevitable. Doctor Who was a very famous and popular science fiction TV series, and we were going through the William Hartnell era of the first Doctor. And obviously, Star Trek here was competing with Doctor Who for a big time slot here in regards to which one's a very famous, cerebral, various alien worlds or just time periods. There's a lot of parallel Earth style episodes here where Kirk and the crew go find a planet and it's stuck in a certain time period that everybody is dressed in a certain era. We see technology, we see cars, a lot of things that are on the Earth, our Earth, from various time periods. There's an episode where we get to see World War II era stuff, and that's because one of the starship captains from another crew that Kirk has gone to find for a distress signal, he finds that one of the people has survived, and this captain has basically introduced World War II era government to this planet so that he could get it under control. And it's a very prime directive-y episode, but it's basically just a time travel episode. It's basically just a time travel episode. Let's take the Enterprise crew to World War II era Earth. There's another one called Let's Take the Enterprise crew to Al Capone era Chicago. They go to a planet that's full of Al Capone era Chicago Mafia stuff. They basically find the Chicago Bible, Mafia Bible, which is what the people of this planet worship as like a religious text. It's basically just an encyclopedia, historic recounting of events of the Chicago mobs. And that's very funny to me, because that this entire planet, this predator species, started to copy Chicago Mafia stuff. But that was basically just a Doctor Who type of story. Let's take the Enterprise crew to Chicago Mafias. Let's take it to World War II. Let's take it to the Wild West. I bet the Wild West is coming next. But yeah, there's a lot of time travel shticks going on here. And I want to say that's Doctor Who inspired. I want to say it was inspired by the popularity of Doctor Who. And that somebody on the marketing crew or the storyline crew or the script crew, whoever comes up with the episodes before they start filming, they start talking about this and they start to say, a lot of these episodes would be pretty easy to make if we just say the Enterprise, but in this time period. The Enterprise, but on this time period. And since time travel isn't necessarily something the Enterprise can easily do, except when it can, like with Assignment Earth, they normally just try to find a loophole, like say, oh, we find a parallel Earth. Here's a parallel Earth, and this planet is basically World War II era. Oh, here was another parallel Earth, alternate history. This is a modern day, but if the Roman Empire never fell. Here's another modern day, but if the World War II party never fell. It's a very interesting look and alternate history, because we get to see how planets and cultures could develop. There's another episode where Kirk finds two primitive species. One has guns, and one is basically fighting with spears and sticks. And he learns that the people fighting with spears and sticks are the descendants of the United States. And this other crew are a bunch of Mongol-looking dudes who were probably descended from another thing that I don't want to mention. But basically, Kirk ends up reading the Constitution to the swords and the rocks and sticks people, and reminding them of their culture and their history. And it's basically another parallel Earth story. There are a lot of parallel Earths in Star Trek that make me wonder how many of them are out there, how many planets that develop exactly like Earth, but they diverged in a certain spot. They kind of remind me of like the various faults from Fallout. With the Fallout series, you go to Fault 26, Fault 12, Fault 78, and you get to see how each culture diverges. You have an origin point, 50s aesthetic Fallout people, and then they develop, and they diverge, and they're isolated, and the cultures evolve in different ways. And it was all intentional by Vault-Tec. They were all intentional by this sociological experiments that they were making to see how people would develop in certain different ways. There's one vault where there was just one man, and every other person in the vault were females. I kind of want to know more about that one, but it's very funny. It's very goofy. But that's what reminds me. That's what these parallel Earths remind me of, is the faults from Vault-Tec and all that stuff. But they're obviously just cheap, easy ideas where they could just say, oh, this is Earth, but... And they just take the Enterprise there. And it's probably because the show had a lower budget, and Season 3 is going to have an even lower budget than that, so I could expect a lot more goofy episodes. There's not as many episodes in Season 3. There's not as many. Season 2 had quite a few episodes. Season 1 is clearly the best one with the most cerebral type of storytelling. Season 2 and 3 obviously have Chekhov, but I don't know if he's actually the best character or not. I haven't seen an episode that really makes him shine yet. Maybe Season 3 will give me an episode where Chekhov will get to shine. Because so far, Chekhov is just an okay character. If I were to say, in terms of the bridge crew and McCoy and everybody, which ones are one of my favorites in descending order, I would say that Spock is my favorite, followed by Kirk, then McCoy, then Scotty, Sulu, Uhura, and then Chekhov at the bottom. But I don't know, maybe he will grow on me for Season 3. Maybe he will become better in Season 3. Anyway, I could talk about a couple more of these, but I don't really feel like it. There are a lot of them that kind of just blend together. And there are some that feel like they're very interesting. There are some that feel like really cerebral things that really make you think. There's some of them that are still like that here, but overall, it's an inferior season to season 1. But is it bad? No. In fact, there is a Assignment Earth that takes place in 1968. And there are a lot of things that happened in 1968. And they mention one of those things that happened. And that brings me to something that Uhura's actress mentioned in an interview. How she was going to quit the series after season 1. But then she met a certain person who convinced her to stay on the show because it was very important. And that person ended up being Dr. King. And Dr. King convinced Uhura's actress to come back to Star Trek, and so she rejoined the series. And it was a very tragic thing that during filming of season 2, that very same person who convinced her to stay on the show passed away in very unfortunate, forced passing away circumstances. It's a very interesting show in the background, the behind the scenes, with all those types of stories. I could spend an extra hour talking about a lot of these behind the scenes stories because I find a lot of them to be very fascinating. But I would just encourage you to go look them up yourselves. There are quite a few of these bonus features here where you can look at all of the interviews and commentaries from all these actors. Leonard Nimoy especially, he has a lot of great commentary on the behind-the-scenes development of this series because he's been there since The Cage. He's been there since the very beginning. He had a lot to say about this series, and I'm glad they put a lot of his interviews in the special features, and you can probably find quite a few of those on YouTube. Just go look them up if you're that interested. Either way, that's season 2. I'll be back for season 3.